Hi everyone and welcome to Module 9, which is on positive behaviour support for engagement and learning. And this is an extremely important module, and I'm not going to do a voiceover for the entire group of slides that's on this PowerPoint because it honestly would be a really long audio for you to have to listen to. But I just wanted to go through some important points, and it carries on from what we were looking at last week in terms of behaviour and what behaviour is communicating. So there's some fantastic references here. The PBS website in particular is very good and one that I think is worthwhile looking at. I'm also going to be adding a couple of articles on Moodle that I just recently found that I think is worthwhile looking at. So it's up to you to take a look at the things that you will find beneficial to you. So the essence of discipline is finding effective alternatives to punishment. And I think that's a really important quote, because in the past we've approached behaviour from a discipline model, from a punishment model, rather than looking at discipline as behaviour management. And they're very different things. And if we think about behaviour as communication or communicating something to us, then punishing certain behaviours really becomes detrimental to that student rather than beneficial. So an example I think I talked about last week in the in the tutorial, if you were there, is my brother, who has ADHD, had real trouble with handwriting because of his ADHD, and every time there was a handwriting session, he was made to stay in at lunchtime to complete his handwriting. So that became this ongoing punishment for him, which meant that in the end he avoided doing handwriting at all, and he to this day finds handwriting really confronting. So children explain themselves via their behaviour. This is how they communicate. And this is a very key point, and the one that I've been ramming home from last week to this week is behaviour is communication, full stop. I don't believe personally that there is naughty children or children who just want to misbehave for the sake of it. There is usually a reason. Sometimes those reasons are complex and difficult to understand and seem to counteract these kids getting what they really want. But for some would rather be known as the naughty kid or the bad kid rather than the one that fails, rather than the student that fails. So it's important to understand behaviour is such a complex issue. So all behaviours, however, do serve a purpose. Even if it is that student who's constantly disrupting and constantly exhibiting negative behaviours, to become that target student that they would rather be seen as this student that doesn't understand what the work that's being presented to them or is constantly failing. So we just need to be persistent, observant, and smart enough to figure out what the communication intent and functions are. And I often say it's a little bit like being a detective. You need to just figure out what's going on for each student, and that can be a really difficult thing to navigate for a teacher. So the function of behaviours that serves for that child may be adaptive or maladaptive in that particular situation. Just because we don't like the purpose the behaviour is serving in that situation doesn't mean that the behaviour is not adaptive for that child. So again, for example, I've seen students tear up their worksheets. They would rather get in trouble for that rather than let you know that they're having trouble understanding what the worksheet is saying to them. So the purpose of behaviour is to escape from an aversive stimulus, to get a desired object or interaction, or because the behaviour itself feels good, for example, rocking, swinging, singing. So to escape from an aversive stimulus is the example I just gave you previously. As I said, I've seen students tear up worksheets. I've seen them attempt them and then scrunch them up in a ball. You see students throw their worksheets around. They're convicted with some really confronting behaviour. And so what could be happening in that situation is that they're escaping the work. They either don't understand the work, or you've got the opposite end of the scale where it could be too easy for them. So it's important for us to figure out what that might be. To get a desired object or interaction, well, this is a really important one to understand, is that sometimes let's say, if the punishment is that a student has time out during lunchtime, they might prefer time out during lunchtime than being in the playground. So are they misbehaving because they're really wanting the time out and not to be exposed to what's happening in the playground? So again, it's really important for us to figure that out. Excuse the trucks in the background for the moment. And then lastly, the behaviour itself can feel good. So this is especially for your ADHD kids, for your kids on the autism spectrum. Rocking, swinging, flapping, humming can feel good for them, and it can be a way of achieving some kind of a sensory stimulus. I had a little boy once who used to flap his hands on the side of his head every time that we were going to be doing some work. And one day I asked him, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Because it helps my brain to think." So it changed my philosophy, if you like, whereas I used to try to prevent students from doing doing behaviours that looked a little odd or looked a little abnormal, and where I thought, gosh, this is really helping him to think. Why would I ever stop him from doing it? So I then allowed him to do the flapping for just a small period of time so that he could get that sensory stimulus that he needed. And it's really important to ask our students why they might be rocking or why they might be doing a certain behaviour, because these kids are incredibly insightful about why they do certain things or why they need to do certain things. And the decision may be to allow it. Just because we want to normalise doesn't necessarily mean that's the best thing to do. So once you know the function of behaviour, you can teach the student more socially acceptable ways to achieve the outcomes they desire. And as I said before, some behaviours you may just allow. Some you may navigate to other types of behaviour. It's up to you, and you have to decide what's best in the moment. So identifying the student's behaviour need. So is the primary need seeking attention, firmer limits, motivation? So behaviour management strategies will be developed to encourage positive student response. Sometimes students do want firmer limits. They may not have much discipline at home. We just don't know what is happening for them. So giving them boundaries, we can be the only people in their life that is possibly giving them boundaries. So that's a really important thing to do as well. And then, are they seeking motivation from us? Are they seeking some positive support as well? And as I've talked all throughout this entire unit, I think it's really important to be connecting with our students so that we understand what it is that they need and how, and therefore our role can become mentor, motivator, engager. So the student who seeks attention will aim to get whatever kind of attention he or she can get. So we need to praise the student freely and frequently. Maximise the attention they receive for appropriate behaviour and minimise the attention they receive for negative behaviour. The student who needs firmer limits wants power and control. This student needs very firm and consistent limits. This student needs to save face in front of peers. And this student needs to be an authority figure, but not a confrontational figure. The student who needs motivation, this student needs to know that you have confidence in their abilities, that you believe in them. The student needs to be very clear about the expectations you have of them. And we need to ensure that the task is in manageable components. That could be, again, that we chunk the work, we break it up into smaller pieces. And some of your assignments, I noticed that some of your examples didn't do that as well as I would have hoped. So just remember that whenever you're presenting anything in terms of worksheets or booklets or whatever it is that you're asking your student to do, some students find it better when it's one question at a time or one section at a time rather than looking at an entire booklet, because that could actually freak them out. Insist that all the task is completed, and this is especially important for kids who have ADHD or ADD, and even autism for that matter. One of the biggest things is that they can get distracted easily, and so finishing and completion is really important. And that can be more important than going on to the next task. Follow up with this student to ensure the work is completed as well. So behaviours of concern are defined as behaviour of such intensity, frequency and duration that the physical safety of the person or others is placed or is likely to be placed in serious jeopardy, or behaviour which is likely to seriously limit use of or result in the person being denied access to ordinary community facilities, services and experiences. Now that is really a big mouthful, but essentially behaviour can be extreme behaviours can be confronting, and it can be dangerous for teachers. In my role as a teacher, especially in special education, I have been kicked and I've been punched and I've been bitten and spat on and called names and you name it. I have honestly experienced it. But it's really important to know why those behaviours are occurring, as well as keeping myself and my other students safe, because that's the most paramount thing. We don't want to put ourselves in danger's way or in harm's way either, and no one's expecting that of you. So we need to be proactive when a behaviour interferes with skills that they've already learned, interferes with new learning, is disruptive or harmful to others. We all have different tolerance levels of what is disruptive. We need to step back and really evaluate whether it is a problem or whether it is us that it is affecting. So behaviour problems are sensory challenges. Most maladaptive behaviours have a sensory root. Communication challenges, ASD children are 90% visual and 10% auditory. And emotional issues, therefore we need to look for trauma and other causes such as separation anxiety and experiences that may be happening at home. Avoid jumping to labelling the child as naughty. In fact, I don't believe that should ever happen. We need to remind ourselves that the majority of problem behaviours, if not all, regardless of the child's age, are driven by their sensory, communication or emotional issues. They're not capable of telling us what is happening for them. So again, we need to come back to that detective role and figure out what that might be. So we analyse the behaviour, and we can use something like a functional behaviour analysis for this. So we isolate the core target behaviour, question those involved with the student, use data collection, and then something like a functional behaviour assessment. So an example of this could be let's say that every time a student comes in from the playground, that they're noisy and yelling and upset and don't seem to want to sit still. So what you need to do is work out, is it happening after recess, after lunch, after both? So therefore, what could be happening while they're outside on the playground? So we need to ask their peers, ask the student, and then also ask teachers who are out in the playground on yard duty to observe this particular student, to maybe see what's going on when they're out in the playground. And then through data collection and over a period of time, a week or a couple of weeks, we might get some answers. It could be that they're isolated out in the playground. It could be that they're being picked on. It could be that they're just running around like crazy and getting overstimulated. So a teacher may need to break up a quiet time with a playtime as well, sort of where they're getting out some energy out. So it's really important to analyse behaviour like this. And this data collection method provides us with some really good information that helps us decide what we need to do next. So proactive strategies are developed and implemented to remove or minimise the reason for behaviour. And then reactive strategies are also developed for occasions when there has been no opportunity to implement proactive strategies, or this was simply not done and the behaviour has already occurred and must be minimised or eliminated. So I'm going to zip through this a little bit so we can get to school-wide positive behaviour support. And this is fairly, I don't know if it's new so much, but it's becoming certainly more popular with schools. And again, I'm not going to read through every single thing on this page, but I think the most important thing is that the school as a whole developed this strategy. And so everyone is on board, which I think is really important, from the principal down to each and every teacher and every support person as well. So it means that there's consistency throughout. There's support for all of the teachers, and also the students feel supported and guided as well. And there's very firm parameters on what is expected from a whole school. So there's no conflicting messages. And there's also ways that everyone is proactive in making sure that students' well-being is being catered to. So there's a really good I'm going to move that out of the way. There's a really good model here. So it looks at the continuum of support for all, as I said. So this is in ignore that little microphone there, but this means that everyone is being included here. So it's a very inclusive strategy as well. I'm going to let you read through this, because I will add the PowerPoint without the audio as well as the PowerPoint with the audio, so that you can have a read for yourself. And also the couple of articles and other information I've put up should help you with understanding how this works. So the founding principles of positive behaviour support is that it aims to prevent challenging behaviours, reduces the incidence of new challenging behaviours, and reduces the intensity of existing challenging behaviours. Principle 2 is that it aims to teach students how to behave appropriately across different environments. And I really like this because it's, again, setting up parameters. It's giving guidelines that students know this is what the whole school expects of you. And 3, PBS is a whole school approach to creating engaging environments for all. So the focus is on the whole school community, not just an individual student who may display challenging behaviours. And I've talked about this before, is it's really important to make sure that we don't just target students who are behaving badly. So that's why I think this strategy is really important. And 4, PBS is a team-based approach which requires a high degree of commitment from school leaders and active involvement from all school members as well as families. So families are collaborative in this process as well. Principle 5 is that it's a data-driven approach. So data is collected both from challenging behaviours and positive behaviours. So data is collected about school preparedness to implement the PBS framework. Principle 6, successful implementation of a school-wide PBS program does take time. So it could be 2 to 3 years in the making. So some people try it for a year and then abandon it, where you need to remember that these new strategies can take time. The students that have been there longer than others are going to need to adapt to what's been implemented. And also some teachers need to get on board as well. Principle 7 is based on evidence-based practices. And I've already talked about this, so we'll move forward. Principle 8, training of all staff in implementing the framework is necessary, and also partnerships with families is crucial for the success of the PBS program. And I think that goes for any strategies. It's really important to be collaborative with the school, parents, and students for that matter. Principle 10, successful implementation of PBS results in reduction in aggressive behaviour, improvement in academic areas, and improvement in school climate. So restorative practices means that crime and misconduct is a fundamental violation of people and interpersonal relationships. Violations create obligations and liabilities. Restorative justice seeks to heal and put things right. So restorative practices in school, a just school is a place where victims and wrongdoers and the respective communities of care are active participants in processes that ensure equal justice and fairness. I don't know how many times I hear about things like bullying consistently occurring, and where I speak to a lot of parents in my role, and I hear all the time that parents are having trouble with their school because their student is constantly being bullied, and they go to the school and they're not being heard. I think it's really important that schools present this face of justice and equality for all. So victims are empowered then to have their needs met and their experience validated. Wrongdoers are able to tell their stories and be given the chance to make amends. And that's just as important as the previous step. Students who are behaving badly often don't have guidelines on how they're meant to behave. So this is and this then extends out into the community. The community can seek ways to ensure that the incident doesn't happen again. So with the person who has done the harm, we can go through an individual script. Again, I'm not going to read all of this out. You can have a read of this for yourself. And for the person that has been harmed, again, we can have an individual script here where it not only helps them understand the incident, but how it has affected them and what do they need to, what do they need to do, to feel better about it. So that bad taste in the mouth can linger for some. So disruptive behaviour, I'm going to stop it here because I'm mindful that this could be a really long audio, and I thought it was really important just to capture and talk about behaviour in general And so I think it'd be really important for you to read through the rest of the slides, and if there are any questions, by all means put them on Moodle, but the rest of the slides are fairly self-explanatory. But really want you to think about your own practice. What have you thought about behaviour? How have you considered behaviour in the past? I must admit that when I first started teaching, that it was kind of a me versus the student's attitude, in a way, that if I was just a strong, authoritative teacher, I remember one of my mentors saying, you go in and you go as tough as possible, and you show them, I can't think of the way to say it now, but that if you present this really strong, firm approach, and that you let them know that they can't get on top of you, then you can bring your tone down. So I'll just go back. And that's how I started teaching, because that's what I believed, or what I was told. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that that did not always work for some. And I've had some fairly extraordinary experiences that taught me that. So one of my biggest learning curves was when I was working as a CRT, and I was sent to a school. And when I got there, the principal was very abrupt and rude with me and said, we wanted someone who knew something about autism. And at that point, which was 20 years ago now, I actually knew nothing about autism, and not many teachers did. And it was still one of those things that was emerging. And so I went into the classroom with my, as a CRT as well, authoritative approach. And this boy came in and saw, of course, that his normal teacher wasn't there, and went off into a tangent. And what we don't realise is that as a CRT, it's like invading their home. It's like them coming home and seeing a stranger in their kitchen. It's the same thing when they see a stranger in their classroom. It's really disruptive for them. So here I was, this, strong authority, you just need to sit down, and I didn't get it at all. I didn't get autism. I didn't get his fear and anxiety. I didn't get anything. So he proceeded to cut up every single worksheet that I had on the table. He had scissors, and I finally had to call another teacher because I just didn't know what to do, and there was no amount of my authoritative approach that was helping him, of course. Finally, he got so exasperated, he ran out of the classroom and climbed up the highest tree, and we had to call the fire brigade. Now, talk about an epic fail. And we all can, I'm sure, share experiences of epic fails. And what would I have done differently now? Certainly not what I did. I would have been so much more gentle in my approach. I would have let some support people help me. I would have asked students. I would have tried to find out more about the student. I would have let him know that his regular teacher was coming back into the classroom. There's a whole range of things that I would have done differently. So I had to assess then what behaviour was for me, and it wasn't until I remember reading that behaviour as a form of communication, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, because I hadn't ever thought about it like that before. So I'm hoping that will be the same for you, if you haven't already had that light bulb moment. So it's important for you to be reflective, as to your own performance and your own attitudes and beliefs around behaviour. And when we see behaviour as communication, we stop seeing the student as the problem, and we see that it needs a collaborative effort. So good luck with this week, and hope you enjoy the discussion on challenging behaviours and the other things that are in the module. I think it's a really important topic. Okay, good luck.